Hi, everyone. My name is Lisa. We are so happy to have you here tonight on the Vesta Divorcing a Narcissist webinar. I am recording this video for you because I'm traveling. I just got to Sweden. It is 9 p.m. here. I've been up for 24 hours at least. And we go live 12:30 my time tomorrow morning. And I don't think I will be of much help or benefit to you then. But thank you all for being here. We know how hard it is to hop on these calls, press play. You have busy lives, busy jobs, kids, especially in the summer. Schedule is always crazy. So thank you for coming. Thank you for hitting play. And if you are here and you did hit play tonight, we understand it's because you're going through something really hard and really difficult. And I want you to all know we all have experience with toxic relationships, divorce, coercive control, and we are going to give you as much insight and as much help as we can. As I said, my name is Lizette. I am a certified divorce coach, divorce strategist, and coercive control specialist. And I've been helping men and women leave, divorce, and heal from these types of relationships for about 10 years. I am a former therapist, and I used to own a large wellness practice, healing practice. So I've really combined all of the work I've done, all of my education and my own life experience to help other people go through what I went through many years ago. I was in a very abusive, coercive, controlling relationship. And I took everything I learned, all the healing I did, all the ways I rebuilt my life, and now I use it to help others do the same. What I'd love to do when we first start off these webinars is just invite everyone to come into about a 5-minute practice just to get us all rounded and ready to go. So I'm going to turn my camera off for this part of the webinar just so my face doesn't distract you. And I'm going to invite everyone, if you're comfortable, to just close your eyes, let your eyes get really heavy, let yourself get really grounded into the seat that you're in. Start to take some nice deep inhales and nice deep exhales. Just taking a few minutes here to breathe, to come down from your day, maybe for the first time today or this first time this week, taking a few breaths for yourself. Letting your eyes get heavy if they feel comfortable being heavy, allowing your body to be heavy in the space in the seat that you're in. Maybe noticing your feet getting heavy into the floor. Noticing any sounds happening inside your room, around you, outside of your room. Just noticing what your breath is feeling like moving through your body. Noticing the temperature of the room. Are you warm or are you cold? Just noticing the breath for another minute, how it feels flowing through your body. We're going to take a second to change the breath just a little bit. Now we're going to start to go into 5 to 8 breaths. So we're going to inhale. We're going to count to 5. Holding that breath in for a count of 2. Exhaling for a count of 8. And now just allow yourself to stay with those 5 to 8 breaths a little bit longer, letting yourself go at your own pace, but really staying with these breaths if you can. What these breaths do is signal to your nervous system that it's safe, that it's okay right now. It allows it to come down for a minute. Staying with these breaths, and if thoughts come into your head, just let them come in. Almost imagine little thought bubbles floating past your eyes and just let them float by. If thoughts come in, that's what our brain is meant to do. So let it do what it does and just let them float. Staying with those 5 to 8 breaths just a little bit longer. Noticing what's happening in your body with this breath. Noticing if maybe your heart's beating a little more slow. Maybe your mind's racing a little less. Maybe you just feel a little more relaxed, allowing whatever it is to be. Maybe saying to yourself, in this moment, I am safe. In this moment, I am okay. And in this moment, I'm exactly where I need to be right now. Let's do a few more rounds of those 5 to 8 breaths. after you've done a few more, when you're ready, just start to slowly open your eyes. We don't want to shock the nervous system awake. Letting your breath come back to normal, maybe shifting, moving side to side, moving your fingers, moving your toes a little bit if that feels good, and coming back to the room. Since I won't be here live tonight and I won't be here for the Q&A, I have sent Mandy over some tips and some journal reflection questions to send to everybody tomorrow, and also a special link just for Vesta participants that are here with us tonight. That it's a special link for a 15-minute call with me. Since I won't be here for the questions at the end, if anybody has any questions, any information, they're looking for any tips, they can just schedule that 15-minute call and I'll be able to hop on there and answer your questions for you live. First thing I want to talk about is, what is a narcissist? And I was going to come on and I was going to talk about the definitions of narcissists. And I actually classify toxic partners when I'm working with clients and building strategies in about 12 different categories in narcissists. So I was going to come on and explain all that to you. But I'm actually not going to do that because you can Google that. You can AI that. And at the end of the day, I don't think we're here to help you decide if your partner's a narcissist or not, or to diagnose them, because I don't want it to be about them. I want it to be about you, helping you, because you spent enough of your life dealing with them, managing their emotions, and worrying about them. Tonight is all about you and helping you get what you need and the support and help and the information that you need. So I guess it's odd considering the topic, the title of our webinar, but I'm not going to help you decide tonight if they are a narcissist. A narcissist, they're not easy people to be around, but either are most of the personality disorders. Either are people who are using coercive control tactics, or people that have narcissistic traits, or people that are just giant asses. I always tell my clients when they get on the first call and they ask me, do you think he's a narcissist? I think a jerk is a jerk and his ass is an ass. And if someone is treating you so poorly that you need to ask that question, maybe you don't even know the answer to that question to know maybe what you need to do or want to do for yourself. Sometimes we get so focused on the label that we forget about ourselves. We forget about how this relationship is affecting us. That's what I love to start talking about often. And when I went through this too, some of the symptoms that you were feeling when you were someone going through one of these relationships, living with this day to day, is like constantly walking on eggshells. You're constantly managing their behavior, always waiting for the next shoe to drop. You always feel an incredible sense of stress, an incredible sense of urgency, an incredible sense of dread when you wake up in the morning. You're hyper vigilant. If the smallest thing falls on the floor, you jump 100 feet in the air. It's a very common. You start to notice you're losing a little bit of your hearing. You're seeing spots. Your vision isn't the same. You can't remember anything. Your clarity's gone. You're living in a brain fog. You're just functioning. You're in a functional free state where you're functioning, but you're not living. You're not present. Your nervous system is just helping you survive. It's just trying to protect you. It's trying to keep you alive. So if that sounds like you, if you can relate to any of that, we are so glad you found us and we are so glad you're here. When I work with clients through the operations of the divorce, the business of the divorce, the recovery from narcissistic relationships, from coercive control dynamics. But also another big piece is strategy. How do we create strategy that the court will understand, that will get you the most positive impact of this divorce and move you forward in your life? And that is the last way I work with people through the process. It's helping you throughout the process. We're taking steps to build your new life, to get you where you want to be, so that when this divorce is done and over, because I promise you it will be, even though it feels like it's never going to end, I promise you it'll end. You're already off and living your new life and happy, and you're having that already feeling and experiencing that peace and freedom that everyone tells me that they desire so much, and exactly what I desired too when I was going through it. So first, let's talk about your nervous system. These types of people, these types of relationships completely disable our nervous systems. So using techniques for your vagus nerve to increase your nervous system capacity and to heal your nervous system are so important. And Marty can help you with that and talk to you about that a little bit later too. It's incredibly important going through life and divorce to be able to help yourself get to a place you feel better, Your life is better. You flow better. And you're going to have such a better process through this divorce. The person with the most regulated nervous system in the room always leads the room. They always control the room. So we're here to help you, help that be you. And you can do simple things like we just did with that breath work, or there's so many other things we can do and help and teach you also. I know, okay, but is my spouse a narcissist question? It's all over Instagram. We just talked about we're not here to diagnose it. Yes, it's a buzzword, but it's also because we are getting more aware. People are talking about it more. People are more open to sharing their experience. So yeah, there are a lot of jerks out there. Are they a lot of narcissists? Absolutely. Are they going to ever get diagnosed? Absolutely not. Because in order to be diagnosed, you have to seek a diagnosis. You have to seek hope. And the one thing we know about narcissists is they never think they're wrong and they never think it's their fault. Many of them do not ever get and do not ever get diagnosed. What is living with this person done to you? It's exhausting. It's draining. And that's why we're here tonight, to help you focus on moving through that, taking the steps to get through that, even when you feel like you have no more fight left in you. Even when you feel like you just want to throw in the towel, give them everything, or maybe you just want to suck it up and stay because it seems easier. We're here to help you move through it and get you back without falling into either one of those traps. Another common thing that happens is that we feel bad for her. We decide we want to leave. We finally make the decision and we get pulled back. Then we decide we want to leave. We feel bad. We get scared. We fear the uncertainty and we get pulled in again. We feel like we love them, but we also can't stand them. We want to get away from them. We know we need to. We can see what they're doing, but then we wonder if it's us. Maybe we're the narcissist. Maybe we do care about them. And our head spirals in these spirals for days, months, years, sometimes. This is trauma bonding. This trauma bonding happens due to the cycle of coercive control abuse, emotional abuse. It creates so much dopamine and cortisol. Our body gets addicted to that. You create such a pattern of intermittent reinforcement. The body's always seeking the high of when things are finally okay. We get addicted to the relief, the exhale of, okay, in this moment, they're fine. They're okay. In this minute, it's okay. That's what we're addicted to, is the relief, the dopamine that we get from that. And the reason these are so addictive is also because these tend to follow relationship patterns that have followed us most of our lives, often starting with caregivers. So it feels very at home to our nervous system, even though it may not be what we consciously want. It feels very at home to our nervous system. So as we go in, when we begin to heal that and sit with that and notice that all begins to change too. So now to talk a little about what to expect through a divorce with somebody with toxic behavior with narcissistic traits. I'm not going to lie to you, it's not a good time. They're probably going to be worse than they were when you were living with them, but now you have support. Now you have help. And one thing is that now, once you've seen them for who they truly are, once you see it, you can't unsee it. Once you've seen the mask come off and really accepted that's who this person is, you can't unsee it. And so that part makes it a little bit easier because you begin to understand the cycle and the tactics. So expecting them to be worse actually helps plan for the divorce. It helps strategize for the divorce. And it helps us stay in the offensive position rather than the defensive position. As we begin to work with you, as I begin to work with clients, as I begin to build your strategy out with you, clients will often say to me, yeah, but here she's gotten so much worse. And I say, actually, it's a good sign. You're going, because that means they're feeling the loss of control. It means also you're taking your power back. You're setting amazing boundaries and getting little pieces of you back. And I'm just here to help you stay grounded and keep you safe in the process. Often, I know I was too, my clients are told, I've been told for years, that isn't what happened. You misunderstood. They're isolated. They're controlled. They're financially abused. And they're also maybe covertly abused too in really subtle ways that wouldn't be recognizable to a lot of people. But they are to us when you are going through it. What's really important also, I like to make sure I talk to clients about in the beginning is we all want justice. We want the family court to say, yes, this guy is a total ass. He's been abusing you, and we want them to pay. Unfortunately, the family court system is not set up to give us justice. It is set up as to finalize a business deal. That's what I feel like it's setting us up to separate assets, to set up parenting tank, but it's not set up for justice. So in order to show that your spouse, your soon to be ex is difficult, it's really important to show patterns. It's really important to show patterns of behavior that impacts the children and impacts, I don't know, the operations of parenting and finances. And doing so in the right way does help the court over time see what's happening. I always advise clients to find the things that are the most impactful, that are the biggest things, and start with those. Because when we start showing the court lots and lots of different things and start documenting lots of different things, it really floods it and dilutes it. Also, your attorney. Your attorney wants to help you. They want to get you divorced. They want to help you build the right strategy. Do they care? Yes. They care what's happening. They care what's going on in your life, but they also don't have the capacity to be your coach or to be your therapist because they're a really expensive therapist. You do not want to be using your attorney as your coach, as your therapist. So making sure you have the right support through your divorce makes all the difference. And maybe picking one or two close friends if you're talking to family and friends and really trying to not share your story with anyone. Because as a lot of us, people like this tend to have a lot of flying monkeys, tend to like to get information in different ways. So it can come back to bite you. But also, every time we tell our story, we're activating our nervous system. So yes, our story needs to be heard. It's so important. But the more and more you tell it, it actually can make the nervous system really confused. It doesn't know if it's happening now or in the past. It can really prevent you from healing instead of helping you to heal. So that's just a little tip there. Now, going into something else that's really important, like I just touched on, is building the right team. Making sure you're finding the right attorney, the right coach, the right therapist, the right financial help, the right help for your home is all really important, especially in high conflict, high complex divorces with high conflict partners. It's so important to know that this person has experience in that you don't feel like you're constantly explaining yourself to them, explaining the person to them, explaining the why to them. You want to sit with them when you first meet with them and say, yeah, like this person does get it. They understand and they are going to help me. You want to make sure they feel like you're on your side and on your team. Like everybody here and everyone throughout Vesta as a whole. Everybody here gets it. Everybody here wants to help and get you through this in the most positive way, in the most peaceful way possible. So I could go on and on. I have 20 pages of notes for us tonight, but in the interest of time, I am going to leave this here and pass it off to our next Vesta professional. And again, I welcome you to schedule that 15-minute call when Mandy sends out the link. Send me any questions. I think I included my email in there. So any questions you have, I'm here to help you and I'm here to support you and I'm here to get you through this. I know you're going to get through this. I know you're going to be okay, but I also know it's not easy. And remember those 5-2-8 breaths we did at the beginning. You can do them every single day to help your nervous system begin to recover. Have a good night.
All right. That was Lisa's recording there. For those who might not have missed the introduction, my name is David Meyer. I am a certified divorce real estate expert and realtor licensed in Massachusetts and New Hampshire. And before I get into the topics of the house in dealing with narcissist or conflict prone individuals, I just want to do a quick explanation of what makes a CDRE different than a traditional realtor, because it does matter in these cases. So most people know 10 realtors that they could probably call. Check through your phone. I'm sure you know a couple of them. The barrier to entry is low. The difference with the CDRE is we go through specific training in addition to regular sales on how to deal with these high conflict cases and dealing with individuals that may be problematic for the sale for both sides. We follow a higher code of ethics that we follow, making sure that there's no bias and that we're as neutral as possible. And this can be really important when dealing with narcissistic personalities because they're usually going to try to manipulate and exploit others and get them to be their friend and try to gain some leverage in some way along the process. And when I'm operating, it's in a separate chains of communication for both sides, equal but separate. And no one's getting any preference over the other one. And it's all documented. So if these actions start interfering with the sale, your counsel or your mediator, whoever you may be working with, there is a documented record of what's going on, which can be useful for me in the process as well as you, depending on the direction things go. I'm going to go a little backwards in my arrangement so I can hand it off to Maggie and Tom, our certified divorce lending professionals and financial folks at the end of this. I typically will start with the beginning of things, but I'm going to go right into the home sale, followed by if someone is choosing to stay in the property or do a buyout, because all these things are a little bit different. Typically, when someone from the team of folks here tonight reaches out to me, a lot of times my first interaction is to come out and do a price opinion of the property. And unlike an appraisal, I'm not a certified or licensed appraisal, but what we can provide is a broker opinion of value, which can be a little quicker and easier to get than getting an appraiser out sometimes, and also a little more affordable. And this can be a good baseline to help Maggie and Tom do what they need to do to get things started on their end. Because generally, before we can even list the home, one of the highest conflict points is agreeing on the price. And the problem with the price is everyone refers to their house as the largest asset that you own. But unlike your retirement accounts, your bank accounts, some things that have fixed numbers in them, the house is the only one that is a true unknown because no appraiser, no realtor, no one can tell you what that house is going to sell for until it actually goes on the market and is exposed to the market. And especially right now, with the way things are going, a lot of the country is in buyer's markets, and in the Northeast, even though we are still in a strong seller's market, we are showing signs of softening in areas. We're seeing price adjustments. We're seeing a lot more repair concessions when homes are going under contract. This isn't just a clean number. There is no one correct answer that you can just pull up or your Zestimate, which, fun fact, if you look up how Zillow's Zestimate works, they will even say that about 95% of the time, that number is within 5% of what the home sells for. And that can be a big number depending on your price point. And that's the remainder of the time that percentage increases significantly. This is why you do need some physical eyes in the house to get a accurate opinion of the property, to see what the condition is, to see what odors there may be, to see what repairs might be needed, and also to see what that hyper local market is doing when getting ready to price this home. And everyone has their opinions too. When they start talking about what the house is going to be worth, everyone's got uncles, friends, other agents that are going to try to tell them what they should be getting for that house. Part of the importance of using the CDRE during this process is part of the criteria that we go through to get into the doors. We already have a well-running business outside of anything divorce related. And lately, a lot of the trends I'm seeing when talking to sellers getting ready to sell their home is there are agents going out there and they're saying whatever number that they want the sellers to hear to win the listing. And what you really need is someone that's willing to give you the blunt truth about what they think your house is worth, what it will sell for, and what would be an appealing price to list it at, because those are two different numbers. What an appraiser tells you the house is worth and where it needs to be listed to get that number are two different things. And that's something that changes right up until the day that it goes on the market. So early on, if we need to start getting a number in play, one of the things that I can do is get a broker price opinion sent over to Maggie or Tom or your counsel, Jolie or Marty, whoever is working on this process with you, and we can try to get the number that everyone can agree on. If the house does have to go to sell, a lot of the times this is where we see a lot of the narcissistic behavior start to show up, depending on if they are the in-spouse or the person that's living in the house. There can be some very disruptive and destructive actions that can really harm the sale. And usually what we see with folks that have some of these traits is they're going to start not allowing showings to get into the house. They may not say no, but they may not reply to the showing request, or they might say that day doesn't work. This time doesn't work. And that continues for weeks until the buyer is no longer interested. Same thing can go for if an offer does get received. They may not reply, they may not reject it, and they not even a conversation about a counter or anything like that. The maintenance may stop on the property, and sometimes even fixtures may get removed as kind of a power flex of I'm controlling the situation. And so this is where having a documented account of what the property looked like when it was first presented to, whether it's me or someone else being involved, we take pictures of everything when it goes in. And if there was substantial damage done along the way, that can be helpful to you down the road if you do need to end up going in front of a judge, or if I need to end up going in front of a judge to explain the actions that the other party is taking is making the sale more difficult. And then there's a very subtle one that actually is probably the most dangerous is they may agree to overprice the home because it looks like they're cooperating. But just because they agree to a price, even though it might be 15% over what the market's doing in that area, the house is still sitting. One of the two of you is going to be bleeding the carrying costs while this thing sits on the market. And then when it does finally sell, you're probably going to be at the same net as if you had priced it the right way the first time around. So having someone involved who can clearly explain to your counsel or to the court if needed that pricing it right the first time out the gate is going to net the most to all parties involved, and making sure that the property has access, because if buyers can't see the home, it's not going to sell. And then also making sure that it's being handled correctly when people are asking questions, and we're not just immediately telling folks that this is a divorce sale. This is a protected class when it comes to protected classes in real estate. You cannot tell someone that there's a familial status going on, and telling someone that there's a divorce sale is going to make them think they can get a deal on the house. So one of the main things that I do differently in these cases, and especially if I'm getting the sense that there's going to be a very high conflict party involved, is the goal is to actually make these decisions up front. So getting both parties to agree on a listing price, or at least a starting price, or an agreeable price range of what we believe the house is going to sell for. How we're going to get to that price. Are we going to have an appraiser come out? Are we going to have me do evaluation? Are we going to do both? And then that way we have a range to work with. So if we can get everyone to at least agree on a price, we have one place to start. The next thing that can help avoid conflict down the road when the house is going for sale is agree in advance what's going to happen if after so many weeks we're not getting any showings or we're not getting any offers. You can build in a price reduction schedule on certain criteria. And I have done this for properties in the past where if we're not getting any showings after 2 weeks, or if we're getting showings but no offers after 2 weeks, then we're going to drop the price by 5% or X dollars, whatever it may be, to incentivize things to move along. The same thing can be said about how offers are going to be responded to. If there's going to be a conflict, we can actually get everyone to agree ahead of time before tensions rise that if there is an offer that nets a certain dollar amount, we're going to accept it. That we can base everything off of the net instead of fixating on the price. We can try to get everyone to agree on what the net proceeds are going to be. And when I talk about net proceeds, I'm not an attorney. I cannot advise what the splits are going to be or anything like that. I can tell you what the ballpark estimate proceeds are going to be, and that can be up for your attorney or your mediator to help guide on what that division is going to look like. But if we're focusing on the net proceeds, sometimes it's a little easier to operate than getting fixated on my house sold for $800,000 or $700,000. Also getting repairs, how to handle repair requests when they come up in offers ahead of time can really help take away some of the leverage from someone that wants to control the situation. If your properties are located in Massachusetts, there was a new change in the inspection rules as of October of last year. And going forward, buyers cannot submit an offer that waives inspections, nor can a seller accept an offer that's waived inspections. So they should be expected in every offer. And doesn't mean that anyone needs to do repairs. You can agree that if there's a concession amount up to $10,000 and if the bottom line net still is at or above the number that we agreed upon, we'll just agree to it. So doing all of this in advance, it can really help take the conflict out of things down the road. So having all that set up is very important. Deciding who's going to be responsible for some of the carrying costs up front can also be important so that it doesn't change down the road. Who's going to be responsible for the Title V inspection, which is required before you sell the home. These are all things that, if we can get ahead of them before the property even goes on the market, it can remove a lot of the chaos that can ensue when these things are brought up down the road. So my role in all of this is, I like to reframe it as, I'm more of the architect of the sale because I can't be the true tiebreaker of the property. I represent the sellers of the property, but I can help build this framework that reduces the conflict throughout the process. I'm also keeping it documented. So in the event someone is attempting to sabotage the sale, whether it may be just not allowing showings to take place, they're destroying the property, they're not responding to offers, they're not responding to showing requests, I can then turn around and go to counsel and tell them 9 out of 9 showings have not been granted. We can't get buyers into this house. Or I've sent the offer over to the clients and the email's been open, but no one's responding. And so knowing when to escalate it and get the counsel, get the courts involved can help take a lot of the power away from folks that are trying to control the entire situation. So that's generally what we do when there's a full impasse, is if it needs to get escalated to court. And I've had a few cases now, actually. One was an attorney going through a divorce. So they refused to take part in any part of the process. And eventually their decision-making ability was revoked by the court and a special master was assigned to take over because they weren't complying with any of the recommendations or moving forward in the process. So my notes are a little backwards because I was going to go in the other direction. So moving into, if you're going to end up doing a buyout of the house, a couple things that are really important is having a conversation with both Maggie and or Tom about what does that financial situation look like before agreeing to do this, because it may not be financially feasible. There's a couple other things that can be really damaging if you do them without really knowing what the repercussions are. Just signing over the deed is not going to remove you from the mortgage on the house. If someone maybe you don't have attorneys involved yet and they just say, oh, just sign the house over to me and everything will be fine, but you're still on that mortgage. There could be missed payments that come up down the road, or you try to apply for a mortgage to buy a house and your credit's still tied up because you're on that mortgage. So if you're going to be doing a buyout, this is where Tommy and Maggie get involved to really get you set up to make sure that it's a workable purchase. And sometimes it may be the right one, sometimes it may not. But I'm going to let Maggie kind of take over on the buyout options and how she handles these situations as well.
Thanks, David. That's very good information. And yes, I always enjoy working as a team with David and the rest of the team. Some of you might have gotten on after the introduction. I'm Maggie Eck. I'm a certified divorce lending professional, and my company, Divorce Mortgage Planning of New England. I help you go through the numbers to really figure out if your goal is to buy out your spouse of the marital home, or maybe to purchase a new home. About 80% of divorces involve real estate, and so it is a big part of it. And divorce is difficult. I've helped many people go through this process from the mortgage and banking side. I've been a banker for over 25 years. But then if you're going through a divorce with someone who's demonstrating narcissistic behaviors, that has an extra layer of challenge, and that's what we're talking about tonight. So I am here to help people with the general mortgage pre-approvals and calculate all those numbers. But I want to talk tonight very specifically to if you're navigating this and have someone in your life who presents as a narcissist. And the big things to consider are, if you're preparing and you're thinking about, say you're the person who wants to buy out the marital home and you want to stay in the home, or even be prepared to buy something else. You might be sometimes convinced, and sometimes this is your partner's doing, that you won't be able to afford it, right? Convincing you that you don't have the income to do, or you won't be able to take care of the house afterwards, right? All these things. So myself, when I'm working with you, like Lisa had said earlier on, and this is about you tonight. So it's really, when I'm working with you and you're in that situation where that's how your partner presents, is to come up with planning ahead of time. So if we can look at all those numbers together ahead of time, the numbers help you make emotional decisions, right? So if we're sitting down together, we're going to be looking at your income, the assets, coming up with roughly how much you're going to need to buy out your spouse, looking at those numbers, seeing if you qualify. But there's also some things we're going to talk about to make sure that you're getting yourself in the best position moving forward and watching out for some things. Typical narcissistic behavior would be to try to sabotage the situation. So, one with sabotaging credits. We've seen credit manipulation where they just stop making payments on joint accounts, right? So, I always advise my clients one of the first steps to do when you're starting to even think about divorce and your divorce situation with a narcissist would be to and anyone to pull a credit report. So you can pull your credit report, freecreditreport.com, or go to the individual credit bureaus and pull a free credit report. That way you have a baseline of where all your joint accounts, sometimes there's joint credit out there that they didn't even know they had, just to be able to look and have a baseline of where the account balances were, what is open. Don't close anything, okay? Because closing credit can sometimes impact your credit score. You could maybe put a hold on a card if you're really worried about something, but don't close it. Okay. But just really to get that snapshot to have your baseline of all the accounts. And then be monitoring it on a weekly basis just to make sure that balances don't go up. If there's a credit, especially if it's a mortgage related credit, mortgage or home equity line, make sure that it's being paid. So if you're not the person normally paying it, maybe you want to talk with that person about making sure that keeps getting paid, or just before you're even talking about divorce with them, maybe you're finding out how it gets paid so you could be prepared to make sure if it's on your credit that it continues to get paid. So these type of financial sabotage, right? If there's joint bank accounts, keep an eye on those and just document. Maybe ahead of talking about divorce with this person, pull usually the legally you want to put 3 years of bank statements. So pull access to things that you might have online banking sign-ins for, or establish the sign-in before communicating the divorce to your partner. If you're at all concerned that they may just shut things down or make it harder for you to do that. So when you're pulling all this information together and I'm working with you, we're doing the numbers to figure out and give you the confidence that you can afford it so that when you do go to have these tough conversations, that person is not kind of shutting you down and making you feel like, no, you can't do this. You can say, I did the numbers with Maggie and I feel I can afford this. Or if you're working closely with Tom as a CDFA financial advisor, we work together a lot on making sure that you can sustain it after and post divorce, right? So if we do all these calculating together before you're having the tough conversations, either in mediation or with your attorney or with your spouse, it just gives you a little more confidence around it. The other things that tend to notice are not being cooperative with things like document supplying. So through the divorce process, your spouse is going to need to provide their full financial picture. And it's very common with narcissists that you don't get the full picture. And people will come to me and be like, I don't even know what retirement he or she has. I don't even know about some of these other accounts. And that's okay. We work together and at least with all of your information that you have, and try to do as much prep work together as we can. And then try to help you maybe look at a tax return and identify an account that might show up there, or help you try to get as much of the information gathered as possible, right? But that is something that's probably going to happen. It's some sort of stalling, trying to slow everything down, right? But all you can do is control what you're doing. And if you can show your attorney and show the judge that you're providing everything forthcoming and that you're doing your numbers, you're doing your part, right? The other thing we see is, like David had mentioned, maybe if you're selling or if you're trying to do an appraisal for a refinance or do a valuation with David, that your spouse may try to block a home appraiser from coming in or reschedule things, maybe unrealistic about the equity buyouts, right? And or won't do that maintenance on the property, all those type of things. There's ways too in my world that maybe we look and maybe we can do more of a desktop appraisal or things like that if you know you're going to be staying in the house. And maybe we can be strategic about using some programs that we don't have to involve that other person, right? So it's all about strategy. It's about talking. It's about planning and having this dream team, as Jolie had said. And we're all a piece of that. Myself, as a CDLP, certified divorce lending professional, there's about 200,000 loan officers, mortgage loan officers in the country, and less than 5% of us are certified in divorce. I'm, again, very passionate about helping you through this process and be successful, but especially if you're dealing with a very high conflict situation. The goal would be to do as much as we can to prepare you for those tough conversations so that you go in feeling confident. And I know my partners, Marty and Jolie, on the legal side, if we're doing all this work together, meeting with me can happen at any point, but you definitely want to do it before you're signing on the dotted line so that you're not agreeing to something that you can't actually afford. But oftentimes, if you're doing the numbers with me and then I'm able to give a report over to your attorney or your mediator, it just makes your sessions with them that much stronger. So, like I would do in real life, I'm going to turn this over to Marty and Jolie.
Thank you, Maggie. So before Marty and I begin, we want to just give a little disclaimer because we are attorneys, of course. So Marty and I are licensed to practice in Massachusetts, and we are a Massachusetts-based hub. So in our section of the presentation, we'll be referring to Massachusetts laws, but divorce laws are state-specific. So if you are in another state, we encourage you to consult with an attorney in your jurisdiction. However, this will be high-level information, so it should still be helpful to you. So I just want to start out talking about labels a little bit that Lisa mentioned at the beginning, and realistic expectations about what you can expect from family court. So unless your former partner has been diagnosed by a qualified medical professional with narcissistic personality disorder, you should not label your ex as a narcissist in court. It is actually extremely rare for people who have this disorder to receive this diagnosis because they typically do not seek out professional mental health support. And unfortunately, the word narcissist has been so incorrectly overused in family court, especially over the past several years, that judges almost automatically dismiss this term and roll their eyes when they hear it. And they don't want parties to diagnose their partners without any medical qualifications. So avoid using the term narcissist in court at all costs. Instead, you want to focus, like Lisa said, on patterns of coercively controlling behavior to explain the imbalance of power during your relationship. This can look like financial abuse, such as restricting access to money or credit cards. I can't tell you the number of women, especially I meet with, who are given an allowance to use. Psychological abuse, such as name calling, emotional blackmail, and gaslighting. And technological abuse, such as monitoring phone use and emails. And remember, just because your ex may be a narcissist or a straight up jerk does not mean that this will ultimately have any effect on the equitable distribution of the marital estate in a no-fault divorce or custody decisions if the court decides that they are still a fit and proper parent to maintain custody. This is the part that can be very difficult for a lot of parties to grapple with. As Lisa mentioned, the family court is quite limited in what they can actually do under the laws. They can make orders about dividing property and making custody orders. There is no restorative justice for the years of your life that you devoted to your marriage or the sense of self that you may have lost during that relationship. There are no punitive damages, meaning money that you can receive as compensation, as an award for the psychological abuse or trauma that you may have endured due to your partner's behavior. And judges don't have a magic wand to magically turn your ex into a cooperative co-parent. And I think it's important to realize and accept this from the outset because many people end up extremely disappointed in the family court system. And sometimes it's very justified. I can absolutely acknowledge that. Judges make a lot of bad decisions. But I think it's important to remember up front for what the court is actually set up to do and what they are not set up to do to create realistic expectations for yourself. There is some good news, I promise. I'm getting to that now. The good thing about divorcing someone with narcissistic traits or a high conflict personality is that they have a predictable playbook that they tend to follow in divorce cases that you can prepare for.
Number one, and Maggie was just talking about this, they are likely to not be transparent about their finances. They will probably delay providing mandatory disclosures or send incomplete documents. They'll keep you having to follow up to get complete sets of documents. Or this is another common tactic, they may try to rush through a settlement by providing unreasonable take it or leave it deadlines without providing complete discovery. Some tips to combat these common tactics are: number one, considering engaging with a certified divorce financial analyst like Tom, he's our CDFA in the group, and or a forensic accountant if the math is just not mathing, or there's holes, or you don't have a grasp on the entire marital estate. Two, don't rush into agreeing to settlement proposals. Those false deadlines, they're just trying to bully you and rush you into a settlement. They're just creating false urgency. So just don't worry about them. Three, consider sending subpoenas directly to the banking institutions instead of relying upon your ex to send you full sets of statements. Just have your attorney send a subpoena to Bank of America or Citizens Bank or wherever they do their banking and just get the full sets of documents for them. Keep your ex out of it completely, and you'll get all the documents. Another common tactic, they are likely to provoke you. They know your weak points and they will hit below the belt. This is how they can exert post-separation abuse and continue to try to control you. Don't fall for the bait. Tips to combat this. Number one, not every communication needs to be responded to. Set communication boundaries for yourself and stick to them. We like to use an acronym BIFF, BIFF, to when you're corresponding with your former spouse. Keep it brief, informative, friendly, and firm. So that's all you have to do. Keep it brief, informative, friendly, firm. Not every communication needs to be responded to. And don't be afraid to defer to your attorneys if you need help. And remember these two mantras. I share these with my clients quite often. First, just because your ex says something doesn't make it true. The judges hear a lot of lies. So just because they say something doesn't mean that the judge is automatically going to accept it as a truth. And the second thing, just because your ex asked the court for something doesn't mean they're going to get it. People ask for unreasonable things all the time, and it doesn't mean that the judge is going to give it to them. So just repeat these two mantras to yourself. They will help. Another common tactic, they are likely to hire aggressive litigators who will enable their poor behavior. There can be a desire to hire your own attorney, who parties like to describe as a pit bull or a shark, but I find that two hotheads going against each other only further fuels the flame of conflict. Instead, I would look for an attorney who's not a pushover and can hold their own, is familiar with these narcissistic tactics and negotiating with high conflict personalities, and is focused on solutions and resolving your case. You just don't want somebody who's going to just keep running up the tab and keeping the case going. You want somebody who's going to bring this conflict to an end. And finally, another common tactic, narcissists want to feel like they won. To successfully negotiate with a person with a high conflict personality, they need to feel like they got the better end of the deal. So it's imperative, and I think Lisa mentioned this in her portion, you don't want to show all of your cards. Maybe you have no interest in staying in the marital home, or maybe there's an inheritance that they really want and you don't care if you don't get an interest in it. But don't tell them that up front. Let them think you want it all, because you can use that later as a bargaining chip, as leverage in exchange for what's really important to you. So I'm going to turn now over to high conflict custody disputes. In Massachusetts, there is a rebuttable presumption that in cases of domestic violence, that joint custody is not in a child's best interest. This typically requires escalating abuse or a serious incident of physical violence. So this doesn't always apply in cases of coercive control if there's not a serious incident of physical violence, but it is worth noting that if this has been present in your relationship, this presumption does exist in the state. It does get more nuanced when you're dealing strictly with psychological abuse, financial abuse, and things of that nature. Here becomes particularly important to document patterns of behavior that results in negative consequences for the children. And that's the important point. You need to connect the dots for the court that tie into the children. Because unfortunately, if it's only affecting you, the judge is tasked with making decisions that are in the best interest of the children. And most judges are operating from a default mindset that children should have substantial contact and relationships with both of their parents. So this may not be right, but this is usually what the framework that they're operating from. So you need to make that tie into how is this behavior negatively affecting the kids? How does all of this work in court? Usually we're appearing at motion hearings, which typically last about 20 minutes. They're fast. The judge is largely basing decisions off of he said, she said allegations. There's no formal testimony or evidence that's introduced. Usually it's just the attorneys talking if you have an attorney. This is why it's crucial to hire legal representation that's experienced and familiar with the nuances of coercive control. Additionally, a more thorough investigation, such as having a guardian ad litem appointed, may be helpful to illuminate these patterns of coercive control and those resulting negative effects on children. And when litigating these issues, keep in mind that this is a fairly new concept for the judges and other professionals involved, and there may be an education deficit. The family court judges are not required to be experts in every aspect of the law. And it's often an attorney's job to remind the court of the legal framework as it evolves. You may need to bring in an expert on coercive control to testify if your case goes to trial as to the connection between the behavior and the specific detrimental effects on a child. Is a child regressing in school? Is there a pattern of behavior around transitions? Is a child being asked to spy on a parent or otherwise involved inappropriately in the litigation? I will end on this note. Many people with narcissistic personality traits seem to like the idea and image of being a hands-on parent, much more than the daily reality of being an involved parent. I've had cases where we've either agreed or the judge has ordered a 50-50 temporary parenting schedule. And the high conflict parent figured out relatively quickly that it wasn't all that they thought it was cracked up to be. This is usually when the kids are younger, especially. And the children ended up being over time more and more with the primary caretaker. So sometimes things will work themselves out over time. So sometimes it could be a strategy to actually give them what they say they want and see how it turns out. So Marty, with that, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Jolie. Some really great information. So I'm going to talk about mediation in the context of working with a narcissist or narcissistic, that word, and high conflict, because a lot of people believe that we can't do mediation in these types of cases. And the answer, my favorite lawyer answer, is it depends. So before we really get into it, I just want to bring us back to what Lisa opened us up with and really coming into the body, that if you're experiencing feelings of control, like that somebody is demeaning you, that you're constantly being put off balance or being talked down to, you're feeling it in your body and your nervous system. It doesn't matter what we call it. That is your experience and it's valid. What we need to do from the legal process, though, as everyone here has talked about tonight, is we need to understand the pattern of behavior and start to learn how that shows up. And so when I'm talking with folks and trying to determine whether or not mediation is going to be a good fit for them, I don't really care what title you give it. I really want to know, how is this behavior? What is the pattern that's showing up in this relationship to determine whether or not I'm going to be able to work with you. So a few things to think about or to consider, that when I'm trying to understand, when I'm working with folks on a case, I want to know what I'm dealing with, because how I respond is going to be different. So some of the questions, if someone's just being difficult, like they're going through a lot and they're having an emotional reaction and they're in more of, I don't know how to deal with this, I am flooded, I can't make decisions, I can't show up in the room, that's probably okay. We can still work with that in mediation. They're going to need some more structure. We're going to want to probably have a coach, maybe a reality check, something to really help that person stay in the process, in the container. If I've got someone who we determined has the narcissistic traits that we've talked about, it's still manageable. We work with those traits. I start to look for them. I understand them. I don't use the N word ever. I'm not calling somebody a narcissist. I'm not going to say that's a narcissistic trait, but I'm going to understand that's what's happening. And we're going to call out the behavior and why it's problematic within the context that we're working in. And we're going to set up some boundaries. And we're not expecting empathy, because one of the things we know with somebody who has narcissistic traits, empathy is just not there. So if we're waiting for that person to have that kind of empathy, we're going to be waiting all day. The other piece that I want to reiterate that I think everybody has said here too, and the importance of a team, a coach for both parties, right? So somebody who has these narcissistic traits or tendencies may or may not get a coach. I've seen it both ways, but when somebody's open to having a coach, I think it's hugely helpful, particularly in cases that show up like this. So coercive control, Jolie just talked a lot about that from the legal standard. And as I mentioned in my intro, and for anyone that didn't hear that, I spent most of the 30 years that I've been doing this work, working in the field of domestic violence and coercive control before it was even a thing, before it became recognized by the law. Mediation is not impossible, but there's going to be a lot more guardrails put in place that I need to be really clear about it. And when I do intakes with folks, I have a very lengthy intake, and there's probably 3 or 4 pages in every intake, every person that meets with me, that I'm doing the safety. I'm talking about safety within the context of the relationship, emotional, financial, physical, and control. So if somebody is high conflict, mediation may be possible, but we're going to have to structure it very carefully. There's going to be a lot of pre-meetings. There's going to be shuttling back and forth. I may not mediate with them in the same room. We're going to have very clear ground rules. And in cases like this, I favor them having their own attorneys. And I'm really happy to do the process with the attorneys. And sometimes that is the best result for cases like this, because you each have your own advocate. You have the mediator who's there to help you continue to show up at the table, to hold everybody accountable and be able to get through it. I don't have the same power as a judge. I can't sanction somebody. I can't hold somebody in contempt of court. Mediation is always a voluntary process, but there are people who fall on this spectrum who do want to get this done in some ways and don't just want to fight it out and spend all of their money in court. So mediation, a very structured mediation with these clear boundaries and rules, can be helpful. So the last one is if somebody has a narcissistic personality disorder. Yeah, if they've got a diagnosis, then they've got a diagnosis. But I can't remember who it was, Lisa or Jolie, who said it. They don't get diagnosed. They just don't. That's just not usually typical. So that's not usually. So I've never actually had a case where somebody has a true clinical diagnosis. So I was going to talk about why the courts care or they don't. I don't. Jolie did an amazing job on that. Pattern of behavior is what you're looking for. That's what we really need to understand, not just these labels that we're throwing out, but what is actually happening. What are they doing? And what is the impact on you and your children? That's what we need to know. And that's what we need to document clearly. When we're working in mediation, though, it's important, but it's not as important as it's important to understand so that we can get to agreement. And I think this strategy is really important as well. And as Jolie was just saying, in mediation, it's interesting because people come in with this whole philosophy of, we have to be amicable. We have to be working together to get through mediation. And that's just not the case. Mediation can work in cases where there are these circumstances, but we really need to be able to understand and contain that and have some true structures. So I want to talk a little bit about the red flags and the warning signs that I'm looking for mediation that's likely not going to work. So when one party is trying to control me as the mediator, they're trying to convince me that the other person is lying before I've even met them, asking me to keep secrets from the other person, or insisting that certain issues are just off the table that they're not going to discuss. They're going to try and influence me in pre-meetings, and then they behave very differently in the joint sessions. Or they're constantly asking me to take sides and validate their position. So to me, that's not someone who's interested in the process. they want and need an advocate who agrees with them. That's not mediation. That's go hire an attorney and go into litigation and see if you can get the judge to do what you want, which, as Jolie just said, doesn't always happen. Most likely doesn't. Refusing to negotiate in good faith. There's no movement on any issues. Everything that is a test or a trap. They're always saying yes in one meeting and then no in the next. They're flip-flopping. And what I want to say about that is there's a difference between someone who's in this kind of behavior that we're talking about versus someone who has a dysregulated nervous system and can't make the decisions and can't be present. And part of what I really try and do is differentiate between the two. And again, there's certain things that I'm looking for that are going to help me be able to tell, is this somebody who's actually trying to control the situation and trying to force an outcome versus somebody who's just overwhelmed and needing some additional support. The other piece says that everything has to go through email. I've had a couple cases like this recently, and it's just that we're not going to litigate, we're not going to mediate, we're not going to solve it through email. It's just not how it's going to work. This is something that needs to be done either virtually, in person or in person. And while we don't necessarily have to have every session together, I need to be with people in the same space at the same time. So whether I'm putting you in different Zoom rooms or the way I have my office structured, I have two spaces that I'm literally in the middle going back and forth. It matters. It can be done, but I'm not going to be, especially now in this world with AI. I don't even know who I'm arguing with or who I'm taking input from, honestly. But when we're there together, it's real. We're talking about real people's issues and we're able to make some decisions and get some movement. The other red flag I wanted to, Jolie talked about this, but it's refusing to provide information. I am so clear at the very beginning, financial transparency is the number one piece that we have to do. You have to be willing to come to the table in good faith and compromise and have conversation. And you have to have financial transparency. And if you don't, you sign in my contract. And if you're going to withhold and dance around it and, I forgot this, or, I can't find this, at some point, it's a hard stop. It's not going to work without that. And so those are the people that you need to go to court. You need to use subpoenas. There's tools and tactics in discovery and litigation that can protect that. Mediation, we don't have that. So when I have someone who's in that world, it's not worth it. It's not worth it for either party. And honestly, sometimes can cause more harm than help. What I want to kind of leave you with is that mediation, as I said, requires a good faith showing up, a good faith, willing to be transparent and willing to be in some of the hard conversations. You don't have to like each other, but you do have to be willing to sit across from each other, even if it's in a Zoom room in some way, shape, or form. So that will exclude a certain population because they're unable to do that. And that's okay. Instead, it's not for everyone. This is for certain people that are able to do this given the parameters. So I am looking forward to answering any questions that people have. And I'm going to turn it over to Tom to talk all about the money.
Hey everyone, thank you very much for that, Marty. So I'm delighted to be here. Sorry I was late for the meeting, but did have a good excuse. Just flew in from Ireland, got here about an hour ago. So delighted to be on here. Just want to talk a little bit about what I do. I'm a certified divorce financial analyst. I've been a CFP as well for about 13 years. So a big part of my job is to level the knowledge gap when it comes to finances around divorce. My book here, The Divorce Financial Handbook, I wrote it to be a knowledge leveler. Inside the book, it says ipsa scientia potestas est, which means knowledge is power. It's really important in divorce that I bring knowledge to the process. It's very typical. In fact, I think the stat is about 80% of people are the non-financial person in the household. Even the person that's paying the bills regularly, they might not have a full understanding of what the assets, the liabilities of the household is. I've seen cases where it's varied between someone having no access to any to having access but not being able to fully understand it. My job is to make sure everyone understands the assets and the liabilities, both pre and post tax, which is important as well. You want to understand when you're bargaining in a divorce that you don't get left with assets that have very high tax liability. That's fine as long as it's balanced out elsewhere. 100,000 in CDs is not worth the same as 100,000 in the 401k, for example. So again, especially dealing with narcissists, you're going to want to, we make it clear whether I'm working with Marty in divorce, in mediation, or with Jolie, we're making it clear that we are going to look for transparency. We're going to do our own kind of forensics light to make sure nothing gets missed. I'm not saying that you won't need a forensics professional, but we have our ways of figuring out, getting all the information. We have a process. We're not going to be rushed. We're not going to be pushed into something. We take pride in our work. We want to uncover what all the assets, what all the liabilities are, etc. And we're going to advocate for you. And that can be whether I'm working in solo representation, where you're my only client, or I'm in mediation, where I'm a financial neutral. We're still going to insist on full transparency, negotiating in full faith, and understanding where all those assets and liabilities are. I think it's really important, whether you're going to go into mediation or not, to build your team ahead of time, to go in there with a game plan. A lot of people come to me, they're not even sure if they're ready to divorce yet. They want to look at the numbers, what the outcome might likely be, and if that outcome is going to give them a sustainable lifestyle. So everyone really, when they come to me, they want to know, am I going to be okay? That's the big question. What's my lifestyle going to look like post-divorce? What am I going to need to make in terms of income? Will I be able to retire at 65? Am I going to work till I'm 70? My job is to help you answer that question, giving all the information that you give me. And I think then when you have that kind of knowledge as to what your financial outcome might look and your possibilities, it brings back a bit of confidence. You've got a baseline that, okay, if I'm going to be okay if I do this or that, or work this way, or make this much in income, then you can start thinking about, okay, I'm not going to be scared. I'm not going to be pushed into anything. And here's my baseline where I'm going to be okay. That doesn't mean we're not going to negotiate for more or go for more or get you an equitable settlement. It brings a little power to the process. You're not going to be bullied anymore. The narcissist is not going to push you around, and you've got people that want transparency and are going to put it all out there and give you the knowledge you need. I've met people before. I wish our team had met them early on, that have said, I just got worn down and I folded and I just gave the house or gave this or that. We're here not to delay the process unreasonably, we're conscious of your time and your money spent in the divorce process, but we take pride in what we do, and no one's here to let someone be pushed over. We want an equitable settlement, and we're going to let you know where the guidelines are financially and legally. My part is not the legal aspect, obviously, but the financial aspect. We can give you an idea about what the parameters are as you go through your divorce. Let me see. Marty talked about setting the tone. I love working with Marty, where we have had cases where someone came in and we're trying to be very dominant from the very start, trying to lay the tone. This is what I do. I do everything for the family. I was so generous. I did this and that for the other spouse. And they're setting the tone already, and we're wise to that. And we're going to make sure that there's equal time spent on the conversation when we're in mediation. And we're going to spend equal time with both spouses. It's not going to be a one-way show, and that's for sure. So let me see what else I have. I want to be conscious of the time because we do have a lot of questions put in, and I want to leave a little bit of time here to answer some of those questions. I know Maggie in particular has been all on top of those questions that we've had ahead of time here. So I'm going to go maybe to Maggie on those questions. You have all our information here. I think almost all of us, we have at least 30 minutes of our time complimentary. So really encourage you to build a team. I'm delighted to be part of this team. They're all phenomenal professionals. We collaborate so well together, and we're just here to help. So Maggie, is that okay if I turn it over to you to try and field some of those questions in a
Yeah,
very short space of time here?
I know we had so many great questions from you guys ahead of time. So I just sorted through and pulled for those of you that are actually live on tonight, we can answer those questions. Does that sound good, team?
Yeah.
Yeah. Does anyone though on the Vesta team have anything else they wanted to add in before we go to questions? No? Okay. Then good. Okay. So we've got this one I thought for Jolie or Marty. How do you present evidence of financial abuse so the judge will take it into consideration? Looking for a delay in sale of the home so I can refinance in my name, but need to improve credit, which was directly impacted by abuse.
Yeah. So the tough part is, like I mentioned, those motion hearings are really fast. And so your attorney would have to do a really good job to pare down the most compelling facts to get that info out at a motion hearing and at a pretrial conference to say why you would need deferred time to be able to get the house for refinancing. It helps too, I will say, if there are kids and you're wanting to keep them in the same school district. So there's other circumstances that could come into play and also be helpful on your side as well. Do you have any other ideas, Marty?
Sorry, I was answering one of the questions on there. No, this is partially why I don't love to do this anymore. And I leave it to Jolie because it is. I think that having the documentation and really showing as much as you can through the accounts, honestly, like really, and it is a challenge when one person doesn't have the information, but I have seen judges when, and especially if they're not providing it, but on the temporary orders, that's usually something you can get more at a pretrial. It's hard in a temporary order, especially if you're going within weeks of filing.
To stay with the two of you here, tips for navigating filing for contempt after a divorce, how to appropriately be honest with children and counter the unhealthy emotional habits they are learning from the other parent. 2 in 1 there.
To file a contempt, you have to show that there's been a willful violation of a clear and unequivocal order. So you'd have to make sure that whatever order you're saying is violated, it is clear and unequivocal. There's no vagueness, and you have to show that there's a violation. So that's what a contempt is. It's tough managing conversations with adult children. I will say, based off of anecdotal evidence that I've heard from my clients and their children, even as adults, children don't want to be in the middle. They do not want to be in the middle of their parents' conflict. And so I would advise against talking about the divorce. The more you try to push your children to your side, you are pushing them away. I'm not a child expert, but that has been the anecdotal evidence that I have heard through my many cases. I don't know, Marty, you got anything?
And the judges, it's a contested thing, the judges don't even want adult children to come in. Honestly, they really don't. It's such a taboo thing. And it's really, find some other folks that you can talk to that are supportive and trusted. But putting the children in the middle, no matter the age, rarely works out. And if the children have put themselves in the middle, I do see situations like that. I advise folks to hear what they have to say, but let them find their own sources of support as well, right? Like them finding either therapists or coaches or whomever they need to manage it, because now you're absorbing them. It just gets very messy. It gets very messy. Yeah.
What recommendations does anyone on the team have for living with a narcissist through the divorce process? There was another one about that with, should I be able to get no contact orders during a divorce? If you're living with the person and those 2 in 1, can you do those, Marty, Jolie?
Yeah, I can just start this. There's a no contact order. I'm talking Massachusetts law. There's the restraining orders that you can get that can actually be a no abuse, no contact. There's a litany of things that can go on there. Restraining orders, though, you have to have fear of imminent serious physical harm. And then if it's a spouse or there's certain relationship requirements. But if we're talking about spouses, you meet that. But that's a high burden. So if you're just trying to get somebody removed from the home during the divorce process, that can be challenging. There's certain criteria. I don't think that I ever had a successful motion to vacate. We just weren't getting them in Essex County. I don't know if you've had any, Jolie, but there there's some criteria to actually get somebody to leave the home when they don't want to in the middle of a divorce. People think that it's going to be easy and it's going to be like, oh, of course somebody's going to have to leave. And it actually is very challenging.
It is a high burden to show. The standard is whether continued cohabitation would endanger or substantially impair health, safety, or welfare. So it's almost as high as a restraining order standard. So it's very hard to get. I have gotten them granted, but it's been under very compelling, urgent circumstances. And again, usually where children's safety or welfare is concerned.
Yeah.
Good answers, helpful things. Thanks, guys. Let's see. How do you find an experienced attorney who understands the games of a narcissist? What questions should you ask the attorney before you hire them?
So there is a designation such as myself. It's a certified coercive control trauma informed attorney. So you can ask them if they have that certification. You can ask them what their experience is with coercive control divorce litigation and see what their response is. And it will probably be pretty vague, pretty general. That's usually what you'll get. You'll want to ask for what specific outcomes they've gotten in court. Ask them what their strategy in your specific case would be and if that aligns with what you're looking for. Those would be my tips.
Yeah, look to see where they've worked. Look at them up on LinkedIn. Look at their resume. Again, and not every attorney who's worked for a domestic violence organization is an expert in this, but we kind of have to be. It's what we do for the work. But that might be an indication that you've got somebody who has that. But honestly, you really want to spend some time trying to talk to them. So if they're going to give you some sort of consultation to really get a sense of how they're with you, how they're answering questions, vibe check. It's hard to say. Some people want more specifics, and I get that. But if they don't give you that feeling in your gut and your body that, oh, this is somebody who I feel could speak on my behalf, then I would just keep continuing to interview. I think it's important to find the right person, no matter who is on your team, that feels right to you, not just somebody's saying, again, I think somebody said, hire that pit bull, hire the most aggressive person. I hear a lot of times people have a really hard time with those personalities. So you've got to find the one that fits right for you.
And also be wary of someone who is just a yes person. You want your attorney to tell you the truth because that's what you're paying them for, not to just tell you what you want to hear.
Yeah.
We've got some live ones. We have a couple more from the pre-questions, but this is a live one. Would a judge be able to recognize the pattern in which a very high-earning spouse cuts his hours prior to divorce? The emotional abuse has escalated during my postpartum period. I think he had a plan and was setting himself up for success. And you guys can read it too and give any specifics. But how do you recognize that pattern? Would the judge be able to recognize that pattern?
This happens all the time. All of a sudden, the hours get cut, or they're all of a sudden right before the divorce, there's a big pay cut or something like that. And so what we do is we make an argument that income should be attributed based on the prior earnings history. So this is a relatively straightforward thing that we deal with, and it's very common.
Another spousal support question about spousal support. Worked part-time when the kids came along and retired a few years ago. How will it be calculated?
Spousal support.
So I guess that they were part-time and then now are retired, but it's not clear if the spouse is retired or... So if we can answer it this way, if the one spouse went part-time when the kids came along, how will that be calculated with the other person earning? Let's assume they're not retired and then answer it as if they are retired.
So spousal support is calculated in Massachusetts. That's what we're talking about here. There's some guidelines around it. It's the difference of the income between the parties. You have to have some criteria: length of the marriage and the need of one party and the ability of the other party to pay. If that person was working part-time and they're not working now, there could be some attribution but chances are we're going to look at what the current facts are. In Massachusetts, typically we only have spousal support paid till the retirement of the paying party. So that when that person reaches retirement age, which is 67 right now, spousal support typically ends.
The payor will usually only pays alimony until they reach full Social Security retirement age. So after that point, alimony would terminate.
think we had a question earlier about someone reducing their income deliberately. Can you talk about maybe imputing income to a person where people are trying to game the system, Marty?
Yeah, it happens a lot. A lot of people take early retirement and say, I'm retired now. It's like at 58, and that you are a high income earner. A court has the ability to actually say you voluntarily chose to do that. And that doesn't mean that the other party should be penalized. So we're going to look at that. Is somebody underemployed if they've been working a high paying job for many years? And I think this is that other question. All of a sudden now heading up to the divorce, they're getting underpaid, or they switch their job, switch their hours. You start to look, it all goes back to the pattern of behaviors. So we do look at what the real existing facts are at the time, but then we look to see, are those facts are they credible, and are they showing what's really true, or is somebody trying to get out of having to pay?
A good tip here is to ask for your ex's social security statement. It shows their earnings history, and then you can see what their social security income has been for the past decade or however long you want to go back. And then we can take an average of the last 3 to 5 years and say this is what should be attributed to them, because this is their true earning potential.
I think a lot of the questions we've answered through the presentation, but an interesting one is someone asked, how does one with a disability prove that the spouse is a covert narcissist in court? And made sure to ask this one because I had asked you guys when we were prepping for this, how important is it to prove that? And I thought your answer, it would be good for everybody to hear that it's normally not, right? Go ahead.
Unless it's
It's not
going
gonna
to,
matter.
unless it's going to affect the distribution of the property or the custody orders in some way, the fact that your spouse is a covert narcissist may or may not matter to the outcome of the case. So you may not have to prove anything because it may not be relevant. And sometimes that is really dissatisfying to parties because they want to tell their story. They want to be heard and validated by the court. But like I was saying during my part of the presentation, that's not what the court is there for. They're not going to be able to give you any kind of restorative justice or healing or punitive damages. So that's why I encourage people to seek out peer support or talk with a divorce coach and seek out experts like Lisa Happ or get some nervous system regulation, because they're not going to usually get what they want from the court. They need to get that elsewhere.
Very good. Let's see. Did any of my fellow Vesta peeps, did I miss any? I can read some of the other questions from people who aren't live, but I want to make sure we get definitely questions answered for live peeps.
I
I
think
think
we
the
answered all of them.
There
I
was
think we should
one-
probably wrap up because we are over time, but there was one question in advance I think I would like to touch on before we go. And it was asking about engaging with a co-parent coach, like their narcissistic ex wouldn't agree to engage with a co-parent's coach. And that happens all the time because narcissistic people don't want to better themselves or work collaboratively or cooperatively. But I tell my clients that they should still engage with a co-parent coach because they can empower themselves with resources and tools that will better equip them for how they can respond and react and deal with their co-parent. And that will only help them and their child. And they don't need the involvement of the other parent to make their lives better and their children's lives. So I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah.
All
good
right.
point.
Thank you so much to everyone for sticking with us past time. We hope that you gained some valuable information from our webinar, and please take advantage of meeting with us, and the Vesta Concierge will be calling you over the next few days to connect you with us. And we wish you the best with your divorce journey. Have a great night and take care. Goodbye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Everyone.